Hello, everybody. Back at you with another episode preview for you. Got plenty of exciting NBA free agency news. Personally, I think the Rockets, the Lakers, and the Bucks all make great moves. So we'll talk about that. And then also another round of our AFC East preview. How exciting! We are more than halfway done at this point. So we're gonna cover three teams that we definitely think are playoff worthy, but we might have some debate here and there about their records and where they stand. So stay tuned for that, and we're gonna roll the intro. Welcome back, everybody. Whoa, of course, yeah. What do you got over there?
Being stylish, being cool.
Hey, that's the first time I've seen it. So I had to throw a slight dig at Corey, but welcome back, guys. Hope you enjoyed your Fourth of July weekend. My man is wearing sunglasses inside the house with the lights on. But let's ask him, how was your Fourth of July?
It was good 4th of July. Gotta hear some amazing news about food, eating, sport competition. I'm sure you guys are all super hyped about that.
Joey Chestnut does again, 62 hot dogs. Would you consider that a sport, to be honest?
I mean, it's like physical training that he has to do it. So, you could
I
argue
don't
he's,
know. I don't know. Like that's like training though. Like everybody kind of trains.
yeah, but not every person can do that.
I mean, I guess if e-gaming's a sport, then hot dog eating competition is probably a sport, I guess. So
Yeah,
um,
he's the
props
goat
to
of
him.
sports.
That's a lot of hot dogs. I wouldn't eat 62. My stomach would go for a toss if I tried to do that. So props to him. I could never do it. Well, in other news, we got a lot of NBA free agency news. I know there's a lot of talk about Damian Lillard being traded here or there, Miami Heat possibly, but we don't know. It's still up in the air. But Corsian, besides your hope that Damian Lillard goes to Miami Heat, what have you seen so far that you like or you think is interesting?
um, yeah, I guess from what I've seen is I mean, I liked the Lakers' current free agency right now. I mean, they brought back guys that I was really excited for in Hachimura and Reeves. I think, they really stepped up during the playoffs, and those were the two guys I was like, if anything happens like crazy with free agency, I'd hope that the Lakers retain those two guys, and then obviously, they brought in a whole bunch of other pieces too, and obviously they brought back Russell, but I think that was kind of just one team that I was excited for. I mean, I'm not necessarily a Lakers fan, but I thought they did really good. Obviously, it's a lot more fun when your team has a lot of like moves like the Lakers do. The Heat only have a couple, which is more than a few other teams, I guess, which is good. But uh, still praying for that Dame trade. So uh, until then, Heat are kind of mid in free agency, but Uh, yeah, and then I feel like obviously the other big moves that we talked about were just like the trades over the past couple weeks. Wasn't that about right?
Yeah, there were a lot of trades last week. We talked about Marcus Smart, Kristaps Porzingis, obviously the Bradley Beal trade,
Yeah.
the Chris Paul. So those are kind of like the biggest moves we see so
Hmm.
far. Um, but and for all the news, like we were to believe, and Dave requested a trade, so he'll probably get traded. Um,
Hmm.
he's given a lot to that organization, so it's on them for not building around him. He
Hmm.
is one of the superstars in the NBA that is underrated because of where he plays and then also the fact that they're not able to recruit talent to surround him properly. So if that move happens, he'll be the biggest move in free agency slash trades that happen
Hmm.
over this offseason. But I agree with you. I agree with you. I really like what the Lakers did because they made it to the conference finals this past year. And I argued they got a lot more deeper in terms of their roster. And I love that they signed back Reeves and Hachimura because those are the two moves like you have to lock in on the future. And they supplanted their roster with a lot of good complementary pieces. You already have your two stars in Anthony Davis and LeBron. You don't need another star. The Denver Nuggets just showed that. So I look at Jackson Hayes, really underrated center. Cam Reddish, Gabe Vincent, Torian Prince. They're all going to fill their roles as 3 and D stars and shoot the ball when it's passed to them, defend well, and maybe not the Vincent side of it, but he gives you scoring out. He can get 20 a night anytime. We just seen that in the playoffs. So I like the Lakers move as well.
Yeah, and then one thing that like partially surprised me is I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of talk with Kyle Kuzma like leaving the Wizards, but obviously they signed him back for a couple more years. And I mean he is obviously a younger player that can be part of the future of the team, but I feel like everyone on social media, everyone's like, yeah, Kyle Kuzma's gone, he's gone, he's gone, he's gone, and so uh, I don't know. I just remember I saw that like hit the news, and I was like, oh, huh. I guess that didn't happen the way everybody was talking about it, but uh, yeah. And then like on top of that, I just feel like obviously like former big names, there was a lot of movement there, but I feel like a lot of the players that were getting the big contracts, like Lamelo Ball, Anthony Edwards, and stuff, were getting the deals. I feel like everybody kind of expected of them to just get those big contracts to stay for a while. They're obviously the big focal point of their own individual franchises. So um, I feel like it's been like a fun free agency, but it like happened with the trades, and then I mean I feel like something big is going to happen later on. It might be that Dame trade, but I don't know. I feel like there's always that kind of like lull of like, oh, just like the standard, team signing players to like 2 1-year deals. Maybe a guy gets re-signed for a long-term contract, but then all of a sudden something else crazy is going to happen later on, and it'll be kind of just a big shakeup in the league again.
Yeah, and I think one of those things that could happen is Harden getting traded because we've seen rumors of Harden being unhappy with the 76ers, how they're handling the roster moves. And uh, she was a major reason why Doc Rivers got fired too. So I would not be surprised if he gets traded or happens to stay. The 76ers signed Patrick Beverly.
Hmm.
So they're trying to put themselves in case Harden leaves because he kind of served as the point guard of that team. And when Beverly was on the Bulls, I know the Bulls played really well. I think they were 14-9 ever since he got added to the roster. So he brings a winning culture. He does all the little things to help that 76ers team. So we'll see whether or not he stays on the roster. That'd be something I look to. I think another team that I really liked what they did was the Milwaukee Bucks.
Hmm.
They kept a lot of their guys. They added Robin Lopez, Woodbrook Lopez, so double Lopez trouble there. But I really like the signing for Malik Beasley. Like he just fell out of the rotation because he had bad shooting. But if you just look at the Miami Heat, like regular season to playoffs, like shooting's kind of like you need to get in the rhythm, and sometimes you catch fire, sometimes you don't. I think for this Bucks team, they needed to keep the surrounding core around Giannis and add to it. Um, and they did that with Malik Beasley to double down on what they did. I think they'll be a lot more better last year. We'll see how Adrian Griffin does. That's the major question mark on that team. But this is another team that managed to keep Middleton, managed to keep Lopez, managed to keep Crowder, and then added Beasley to that. So they got more versatile by keeping their guys and adding to what they already have.
Hmm. Yeah. Also, our boy Derrick Rose, he did not sign with the Bulls, unfortunately. There's always more time, right?
Yeah, guess it's Siobhan Carter season, and hopefully Lonzo Ball returns next year. Um, I was really excited about what the Bulls did actually, as far as rotational players. I think they added
Hmm.
to guys that can really defend and shoot the three, in catch and shoot situations where I felt like
Hmm.
guys were overthinking on 3 point shots last year and trying to do too much. And I think this will help like solidify the rules around uh, Levine and DeRozan, but that one hurt me in the heart. I was hoping for Rose to come back because
Hmm.
they desperately need a starting point guard that can do the right things.
Yeah.
Has been there before, but
Uh-huh.
hey, if he's going to Memphis, I'm happy with that. The old college team, wearing 23. He's gonna help lead the way while Jaw's out, and then
Hmm.
also help the bench as well. Um, so I'm not mad he went to Memphis to his college team, but
Yeah.
I'm just sad he didn't go to the Bulls.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so kind of a weird time of the year where it's pretty much baseball season. Hockey's done, basketball's done, except for summer league that's going on right now. So we're gonna continue on to our talk of the NFL divisions. And for today's topic, we got the AFC East. Start. I believe we have three teams that are playoff worthy teams out of this division.
Hmm.
Um, I think honestly, this could be one of the more competitive divisions in the NFL. If you think
Yeah.
about it that way. I know we think that for the AFC West when we talked about the AFC West, but this has the potential to have juggernauts everywhere. Obviously, we need to consider what the Tyreek Hill news will mean for the Miami Dolphins because that is huge for them. But regardless of speaking, like there's at least three quality teams in this division.
Hmm.
Okay, so to start, we'll talk about the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills look like they're the team to beat in the conference for the longest time last year, and all of a sudden they slowly falter. They go come against Cincinnati without a Von Miller because he tore his ACL, and that proved to be what bit them because the defensive line just could not generate any pressure or stop the run
Hmm.
at all against the Bengals. So going into the season, what do you want to see from the Bills in order to build on their strong playoff appearances, but not getting the job done at the end?
Yeah, I think I don't know. It just feels like it's hard to say even consistency is their issue because I mean, for the most part, they do play good football, but it seems like it just feels like the Bills always just keep on falling short in like those key moments and like I mean they're getting that experience in the playoffs, and so I feel like that's not even an excuse of like lack of playoff experience. You know, they've had a good core of guys for a while. They have elite players both on offense and defense, but um, yeah, I do think that pass rush was definitely a big weakness, especially with Von Miller going down after he went down last season. And I know they kind of addressed pass rushers and like that I guess field of their defense this last offseason, which I mean makes sense for them, but um, I think I mean I guess we'll probably see more or less the same of what we saw at least the beginning half of last season from the Bills, unless again a major injury happens to someone on their roster. But obviously, it's hard to predict that. Maybe Von Miller goes down again, but he doesn't really have that history of getting hurt. So I wouldn't assume that he would get hurt again.
Yeah, I thought he was the move they needed to get past the likes of Kansas City and Cincinnati. So it was really unfortunate he wasn't able to be there when they were facing Cincinnati. I think that would have made a difference in the game. But I also think there's consideration and changes you need to look at on offense because they did go from Brian Dable to Ken Dorsey, and you saw the little bit of changes in that difference maker. You Brian Dable did a good job scheming plays for Dawson Knox, Gabriel Davis, and those surrounding players. And
Hmm.
while Stephon Diggs had a great statistical season, you need more pieces around him to help prop him up where he can go one on one freely without worrying about team scheming against him. And I think they did a good job of this in the draft. Um,
Hmm.
and we'll talk about the changes they've had, guys that are under the radar that I think will step up a lot. But let's pull up their schedule and then break down how we how we look at their schedule throughout the season. Because while they do have a lot of quality top tier teams on their roster, we're both confident enough that they're going to have double digit wins in the season.
Hmm. Yeah, and like yeah, they have tough games to play, but when you look at it, I mean, like the Bills are still one of the premier teams in the NFL, and so despite having hard schedules, like we both have them beating Kansas City in Week 14, and um, I mean, we have them winning tough matchups, and I mean, they get their fair share of them, which I think just speaks to just how strong of a team and how dangerous of a team this can be throughout the whole season. Just because I mean, like they really can, like this is one of those teams that theoretically could go undefeated just because of the high power level of this offense that they got, and um, but obviously the Bills, like I said earlier, they kind of seem to every once in a while they just fall apart and like in a key moment, and it just happens here and there. Unfortunately, it seems to happen a little bit more in the playoffs. So we'll just kind of see how it plays out. But I think, yeah, overall, we're pretty close to probably what they'll do this season.
I mean, yeah, think about it. How many teams like lose on 13 seconds in the coin toss? That still
Hmm.
mind boggles me, like to no end, because they should have won that game against Kansas City a couple of years back.
Yeah, that was
They had
crazy.
unbelievable. Like that, when I saw that game, I'm like, this team's going to the championship next year. And then unfortunate events that happened to them. But you're right. A lot of quality teams. Like they had what? The Jets, the Dolphins, the Jaguars, and the Bengals. Like four of their first 9 weeks, and it doesn't get any easier. They end with the
Hmm.
Chiefs, the Cowboys, the Chargers, the Patriots, and the Dolphins to end their season.
Hmm.
But I think by the time they hit like week 9 onward, like they're going to be battle tested by that because this is a team that's been there, done that, and a lot of these teams like the Jets and the Jaguars are just starting to put their pieces together, just starting to get underway.
Hmm.
I still think the Bills are a well oiled machine that could take on those teams and comfortably win. Um, I have them losing a couple games. Like I think the Bengals and the Eagles have better constructed rosters, which is why I think they're going to lose to them.
Hmm.
But I would not be surprised if the Bills like blow like games against the Chiefs or the Chargers or the Dolphins like
Hmm.
later on and win those games against the Bengals, the Jets, and the
Hmm.
Eagles. I think they're definitely going to win 50% of their hard matches per se, or better.
Yeah. Yes. This is easily a team that could win whatever games that they play, and I feel like if I'd be happy if I was a Bills fan, despite the lack of, I guess, deep playoff success, not making it to the Super Bowl despite getting super, super close so many times. Uh, I feel most teams, most fans could only dream of having this type of success over the past couple seasons, and so and I don't see this changing anytime soon either, and so it'd be. I mean, it's fun to watch the Bills. I have one of their wish. I have Stephon Diggs on my dynasty fantasy team, and uh, it always puts a smile on my face when I see him just go off on other teams, and that helps me win a lot of good games.
Yeah, I mean, and credit to this team. They invested in Josh Allen. A lot of people thought they were stupid for doing that.
Hmm.
Jalen Ramsey thought they were stupid for having him at QB as well. And all he's done is made strides since then. You got to give him
Hmm.
credit. You got to give McDermott credit, Brandon Green credit. First class organization. They know how to draft. They know how to develop. They know how to surround the key pieces around Josh Allen. You got to give them credit. So let's talk about their offense and why their offense is so high powered because we're really high on it. But there's a lot of transition with the pieces and
Hmm.
additions they had. Devin Singletary's gone. Um, Khalil Shakir's moved up to wide receiver 3. They drafted Dalton Kincaid. So when you look at this offensive depth chart, what are you seeing right
I think they did a good job addressing, I guess, offensive depth, which I really liked. Obviously, they brought in Naheem Hines last season, around the trade deadline, I think, and he hasn't been, I guess, as dynamic of a player as people maybe hoped or thought he might initially be. I remember in fantasy again, I picked him up for like a 2 3 week span, and he didn't really do much. But I do think that he's a player that you have to scheme, and when you understand how Hines plays, he can be a good player. I really like Latavius Murray. Damian Harris, I think, is an underrated signing, and then you have James Cook, who's obviously a young running back that has unlimited potential as a running back. He started off a bit slow last season, but he kind of started to come into his own towards the end, which that was really good. I love the drafting of Dalton Kincaid. I think that he'll probably surpass Dawson Knox potentially even this season in this tight end room. I think Knox has definitely just benefited from being like probably an average tight end in an elite quarterback system that really only had one truly like elite wide receiver, and so he was just an easy second option to throw touchdowns to, which kind of boosted his I guess stock and boosted his name. And so I think this team will probably run a lot of two tight end sets, especially just with the fact that Josh Allen is a strong runner, and so you need to get an extra body in there that can do blocking. I know Kincaid's obviously better as a receiver in my opinion than uh, and worse as a blocker compared to how Dawson Knox is likely a better blocker compared to being a receiver. But yeah, overall, I do think that this team did draft offensively really well. I know they drafted, I think, a receiver in the seventh round, Justin Shorter, I
Justin
think, and
Shorter, yes, yeah, Shorter.
yeah, and so I mean, I'm like he can be good. Obviously, rookies are always can come out of nowhere, but Stephon Diggs has been phenomenal. Gabe Davis is kind of gone back to mediocrity, I think, and I'm really hyped about Khalil Shakir, and obviously, I really like their offensive line as well.
Yeah, I love this team for so many reasons. I think there's three sleepers to point out. And as much as I loved having Dawson Knox on my fantasy teams and kept popping him up as one of the most underrated tight ends, he's a really good matchup tight end that can win one-on-one matchups that a lot of people don't pay attention to. A lot of people thought Gabe Davis was the wide receiver two on this team last year. No, it was Dawson Knox, and it's always been Dawson Knox. I think the thing with Gabe Davis is people saw the four touchdowns against the Chiefs and didn't understand why they happened and more attributed to, oh, Davis is amazing. Where it was more like Kansas City was scheming against Stephon Diggs and Dawson Knox and saying to the Buffalo Bills, beat us with Gabe Davis. And the Bills basically did that. And so it's just the more like if Davis your like wide receiver three or wide receiver four, it's fine. It's fine because he can win those scheme looks that you have for him while you have Diggs, Dawson
Mm-hmm.
Knox, or these other guys that I'm hyped about go up. So I would not be surprised if Dalton Kincaid surpasses Dawson Knox because they use Knox primarily for like the blocking and kind of receiving game. If you have like Dalton Kincaid as your receiving option, who I think is as good as a prospect as Travis Kelsey was, and that's high praise. Uh, you can use him strictly in the receiving game. You don't have to tell him to learn blocking. He can be a factor in the receiving game. So I totally agree with you. I would not be surprised if he's the second best option on this team by year's end. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be surprised if it's Khalil Shakir. I think Khalil Shakir needed a redshirt season, but
Mm-hmm.
he is definitely a sleeper. Do not sleep on him because he could also be the wide receiver two on this team. He can win one-on-one routes. He has the capability to win all over the field. He's basically a Stephon Diggs clone who doesn't have the experience that Diggs has.
Mm-hmm.
So will I be surprised he breaks out? Absolutely not. I'm super hyped about him. Like if I'm like not drafting receiver enough, like in drafts, I'm grabbing this guy in the 15th round because I think he's going to be a significant contributor on this team. And you just need like 800, like 700, 800 yards from these guys to have an impact on the team.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
the third guy, James Cook. I think he can do a lot of the things that Hines can do, but he's a better interior runner than given credit for. He's a lot more shifty and elusive. You could use him in the outside inside zone game. He is very versatile and given a lot more credit for. I think he's a better inside runner than people think based on the stature, but he can give a lot of things to that running game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just I mean, I guess looking back at the receivers as well, it's like despite Gabe Davis not having necessarily the season you wanted last season, and I mean Isaiah McKenzie was obviously the main slot target here, but I feel like all three of the receivers were at least in terms of fantasy football at one point or another fantasy relevant. Like Gabe Davis, I mean, yeah, he wasn't all that everybody expected, but there were like I feel like every like other week you'd like see a highlight clip of Gabe Davis just like cooking someone deep or even just like getting a contested touchdown just deep down the field, breaking a tackle and just getting like a 70-yard touchdown just for absolutely no reason. And and then like Isaiah McKenzie last season, he was phenomenal out of the slot. I mean, he did have his fair share of issues, but I mean, there's a reason why he hasn't been a starting receiver for that long in the NFL, despite his experience in the NFL in general. And so I think Khalil Shakir obviously showed a lot of really nice flashes last season, and so I think this can be a really good combo of three. Khalil Shakir, obviously, I think he probably would play better on the outside, but if he does develop well as like an inside kind of slot player, then I don't really mind Gabe Davis on the outside. It's like the wide receiver two in this situation, like at least in terms of lining up your guys and just having him basically be like the deep burner threat, and then you have Diggs and Shakir as kind of your elite route running talent. Plus, you have Kincaid and Knox who can just get open in the middle of the field, which really makes this offense dynamic, despite I guess the lack of uh, Gabe Davis's production and the question marks surrounding Khalil Shakir.
Yeah, and don't get us wrong. I think the thing we're being critical of Davis on is if he was the number one wide receiver on the team, could you trust him day in on those third down, fourth down? And in those cases, I think not. But on this team, I think he's a great scheme fit, and it's just a matter of like if Diggs gets shut down, who else is going to help him out?
Hmm.
So I think they have those guys now, and Shakir, Kincaid, and Cook even. Um, and not to mention you have your scheme options in Davis and Knox as well. So they have plenty of guys that can contribute, um, even when the play is not open. So there's a
Hmm.
lot more options where Josh Allen can do his thing, scramble, be superhuman, and then actually find the guys to separate. So I think they did a better job of surrounding it. A lot of talk about Trent Sherfield, do some good things in camp, and the offensive line has been well maintained on this team. I will say that
Hmm.
they did a great job bringing back this um, group of five. I think they can definitely be comfortable with this group moving forward. Top to bottom, one of the best elite offenses in the league.
Hmm.
Period.
Yep.
If you look at their defense, it's really good on paper. Really good on paper. Probably one of the best defenses in the league, to be honest. Um, the main problem, though, that we've highlighted in our preview is outside of Von Miller, who's going to win those one-on-one um, pass rushes? Because they tried to address it continuously in the draft with Rousseau, Epinesa, Basham now, and it just hasn't panned out. I know they got Leonard Floyd, who's going to play the side linebacker spot in this situation. So, and they also got Shaq Lawson on top of that too. So
Hmm.
they're throwing everything at the kitchen sink to get that second pass rusher opposite of Von Miller
Hmm.
upgraded and effective. So based on this, what you see, what expectations do you have for this defense?
Yeah, I think this team can be really good. If obviously, I think like last season, Von Miller staying healthy and like I guess replicating his production is super vital for this team. And then establishing that number two guy behind Von Miller. See, I think Ed Oliver, he's a good, solid defensive tackle option, but I do think, yeah, Leonard Floyd, he's seen success when elite talent's been on the other side of the, football or the other side of, other side of him, where we've seen it. Like when he was with Aaron Donald, he played pretty well. He had, I believe he had a couple good years with Khalil Mack with Chicago.
Yeah,
Because I mean, I think that's what got him his deal with the Rams in the first place. Is his last season with the Bears, and so we've seen Leonard Floyd play well, and I wouldn't be surprised if they transition him down to a defensive end. I mean, he has a history of playing that specific position in the past, and so you get him there in the case of Russo, Epineza, Lawson, Basham don't play that good of football. They even brought in Shane Ray, who's been out of the league for a while, but like they really invested quite a lot there. Obviously, I think the rest of their linebackers, I really like. AJ Klein. I feel like he's a solid, consistent guy. He's not like a crazy elite talent per se, but obviously you kind of have that with Matt Milano, who kind of broke out recently. And I'm actually, I really I wanted the Broncos to get him or try to make a move for him, but unfortunately they didn't. But I do think that the strong suit of this defense is probably their secondary. I feel like most teams could only wish to have a secondary as talented as this Bills right now.
yeah, and you said it. I think honestly, I think top to bottom, this is one of the best defenses.
Hmm.
That's with the 49ers and what the Jets have assembled and what the Eagles have assembled. I think this might be the best defense in the league because look at their starters, tremendous. I mean, they did lose to Al Edmonds, but I think AJ Klein is serviceable enough in this defense where he's not going to be a liability in the passing situations. Um, and I look at their backups. A lot of people would crave to have some of the backups they've had. Look at the amount of rookie picks they invested. Epinesa, Russo, Basham, they all have potential. They just haven't shown it. They just haven't shown it. So there's still like upside for these guys, which is what you get excited about. But you everybody's happy that DeMar Hamlin's here. Like, what a story, man. Well, what
Hmm.
a story. Like, from when that regular season game got postponed, like, everybody was worried about him. And my
Hmm.
heart goes out to him. Um, Unbelievable comeback story. It's great he's even playing again. So to have him as your backup, Taylor Rapp as your backup, like that's solid depth there. Then you got Dane Jackson, Teron Johnson. They proved they can do some stuff in the playoffs. Cameron Dancer's your third string. That's a perfect situation for him, considering that how he's thrust in the starter spot and didn't really show the potential he needed to. Perfect situation for him to develop. Um, and then you look at their defensive tackles. Excellent depth there. I think as far as like depth and like elite starting talent on this team, might be the best.
Hmm. Yeah,
And not much to go on, but I mean, even special teams, they got really good options. Like Bass is one of the best kickers in the league. Hines could do a lot of stuff in the return game too. So even if he's not contributing that much on the offensive end and scheme wise, he can do stuff on the special teams game that
hmm,
not a lot of people can.
hmm, yeah. Overall, yeah, I do like the depth. I feel like this whole team in general has built solid depth. Obviously, there's the question marks around the other pass rushers, but regardless, it is depth, and so I feel like this team really couldn't have done anything more, at least this last off season, to address, I guess, some of the issues on this team. Besides maybe switching out your first pick with or switching out the Kincaid pick with maybe a pass rusher, but at the same time, it's like you're getting potential generational tight end with Kincaid, and I feel like that's one of the things you can risk. I guess a potentially good uh, pass rusher, despite having a bunch of young developmental guys on this team. So uh, overall, yeah, I'm really happy with how this team's been run.
Yeah, and if they get Hopkins, look out. That might be the team to beat. I know I keep hyping up the Bengals trio and what they have going on along with the Seahawks, but the Bills might have an argument to make if they sign Hopkins.
Hmm.
All right, so now we're going to go to one of the more interesting teams in the division in my mind, the Miami Dolphins. They had such a weird year last year where it was like if Tua played, they're one of the best teams in the league, but if he was hurt, then they weren't the same. And it's so I'm so happy for Tua from the standpoint he finally had a coach that just let him be him and built the
Hmm.
offense around him because I just remember like the year before that, people are like Tua's not a good quarterback. Um, well, what was Miami thinking not picking Herbert without giving the dude a chance and then seeing what does he do well and trying to minimize like making him into something he's not. So I'm
Hmm.
really excited about what this team's prospects are now that they have a year down in Mike McDaniel's system. But
Hmm.
and they made that huge trade for Ramsey too. Let's not forget that.
Oh yeah.
But with the Tyreek Hill news, what do you think this team's outlook is for the season?
um, I still think that this team, even without Hill, can be a super dangerous team. I think Waddle is easily one of the best up and coming receivers. I mean, he showed that he can be an elite talent last season, and I think he builds upon that success that we saw last year, and he continues it. And like, 'cause I feel like obviously the dynamic duo between Hill and Waddle did make this team, an extra lethal threat. I still think that teams could even would probably still scheme against Waddle and he can still have breakout games. And I think that's just the kind of potential he has as a receiver that he can take over games for an offense. And so, with or without Hill, I mean, obviously Hill raises their ceiling, but I think with or without this team's offense, at least, is going to be really strong. And um, I mean, obviously with Tua, if he can stay healthy, I know there's a lot of concerns, and he's contemplated retirement. I hope he stays healthy. I really like him as a player, but yeah, I do think that this team has really high potential, and I'm excited to kind of see what the Dolphins end up doing this season.
Yeah, you said a lot of good things there. I think the number one thing that needs to be stated more is Jalen Waddle could be a number one wide receiver if asked upon. I think he was used the wrong way in his rookie season, and he's still led the led all rookies with the amount of receiving yards he had. It was absolutely insane. And I'm just well, I don't know like the count between him and Jamar Chase, but he was right up there with Jamar Chase, who's already one of the best receivers in the league. Waddle, if he had his own team, he could be a wide receiver one. And
Hmm.
I think like without Hill, like I don't think his production will drop off. I think they did a good job adjusting the running back situation in the draft, despite having two functional starters in Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson, where Mike McDaniel could still scheme things up for the team, a la Kyle
Hmm.
Shanahan. Um, he wasn't made by Kyle Shanahan. He's his own person. You could see that with the turnaround in Tua and the production he got out of
Hmm.
it. And I think the moves they made are really like what else can you say? Like they're set themselves up to be a force in this division, even with the Bills. And with looking at the schedule now, like we have them close. We have them really close to the Bills, where I would not be surprised, even though we have them projected at 10 to 11 wins, they could also win the division easily
Hmm.
because I think I had them splitting with the Bills, but they can take both games, honestly, because
Hmm.
I think week 18's at home.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, overall they have a moderately favorable schedule. Obviously, they have a couple typical games in the mix too, and I think that their end of the, I think a big deciding factor on like how their season ends up is the last couple of games that they face, and obviously you both have them beating the Jets in Week 15, and like that very much could be another loss on this team's you know win loss sheet, and so you could potentially have them losing the last four games, but you could also, if things click at the end of the season, they could end up winning all four of those games and take this division and be the forefront of the AFC this upcoming season.
Yeah, and the front the front nine games are probably very difficult for them. You have the Chargers, Bills,
Hmm.
the Eagles, and the Chiefs to start off. But then you have two divisional games with the Patriots. While we both have them winning those matches against the Patriots, never count Bill Belichick out.
Hmm.
They got a better offense. They changed their offensive scheme, so those could be games where they could lose as well. And then they end their last four games with the Jets, the Cowboys, the Ravens, and the Bills. So they have plenty of hard matchups like in between.
Hmm.
So my my thing is, how well can they survive the first four games if Hill's suspended? That if they can come away with a split or better, like we have them
Hmm.
at 3-1, assuming Hill's there. So and he's active. But if they can come away with a split after 4 weeks, I think this team is in like good standing to make the playoffs.
Hmm. Yeah, and like, we know that Tua's going to be most likely playing in the beginning of the season as well, and so if he continues the success he had, I mean, last season while he was playing, um, without Hill, this offense is still going to be really dangerous, and obviously we'll kind of go a little bit more into their offense now, but um, yeah, there's just a lot of, I don't know. I just really like Jalen Waddle. I think he's arguably the best wide receiver prospect in his class, and like I think that all the I don't know. It's pretty exciting to see how it's exciting to see what he can do, especially to see how well he can play on his own if without Tyreek Hill in the picture. And I think that'll be a big, I guess, like way to, I guess for the whole the Dolphins to gauge, do they need to go and address wide receiver next offseason, and kind of see what do they need to invest in. But overall, yeah, their offense it's pretty nice. Obviously, I like Tua. Um, I think he's a cool guy.
Brilliant analysis. But no, I hear you. I hear you. Like Waddle, like if Chase wasn't in that draft class, he'd be a wide receiver one all day. Like he'd probably be the first wide receiver drafted even in this past class if he stayed that
Hmm.
long. So I think um like obviously the wide receiver duo is probably one of the best in the league as well. It's right up there
Hmm.
with anyone you name. Um, I really like Eric Azukama. I'm surprised he's on the third string right now. I would not be surprised if he is their spot receiver by year's end. Obviously,
Mhm.
you have Robbie Chosen Anderson now, and then Cedric Wilson as well. I got super confused when I saw that. I'm not gonna lie, but they're quality weapons, and I think they're like the type of scheme players that can um, only have higher potential when they start, like in this scheme. So I think it's great. The one question I have is I know Mike Gesicki had his he had his limitations as being a receiver only in this offense. And I like Durham Smythe. I think he's a sleeper, but I don't think he's on that wavelength where he is like, watch out, he's about to break out. I don't think he's that type of tight end.
Mhm.
So I want to see how they use the tight end in this offense, but skill position from running back to wide receivers, excellent job on this team.
Yeah. Yeah, I also agree. I feel like tight end's probably the one of the weaker spots on this team just as a whole. Um, and it's like you're sure like Gesicki had his issues, I guess, with this offense, but I mean he's shown in the past that he can be a good playmaker, and just the fact that we saw him in such a small role in this offense, I think says a lot about just how I guess how this offense is run as a whole. And so, despite having a weak tight end room, um, I wouldn't be surprised if like that doesn't necessarily hold the team back too much, just because this team isn't necessarily super reliant on having an elite tight end room. And I mean, the other pieces that they have on this tight within the tight end room, Tyler Croft, Eric Saubert, have experience, playing at the top level of the NFL. They've played, in NFL games before, and I think at bare minimum, you have those guys that understand fundamentals of the game enough that they are playable as NFL starters, which I think is all that the Dolphins need this upcoming season. Compared to a team like the Chiefs, where obviously the focal point of their offense is the tight end, and without Kelsey, I mean they probably do good, but like their offense will definitely take a hit without the superstar elite guy. Or you look at um you know the Raiders from a couple seasons ago with Darren Waller as the focal point, and um, I feel like this is just not one of those teams that requires a focal point tight end, and so it won't be the biggest thing. And I like their offensive line too, so it's not like their offensive line needs tremendous help from that tight end position, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. And a lot of what you said, I agree because this is like a kind of like a motion based offense where they have a lot of like read and react kind of plays, read option. To start, they sprinkled that in there with the run pass option. And to be fair, they did spend capital on Elijah Higgins from this previous
Hmm.
draft. And he's kind of like a poor man's Darnell Washington. He's a toolsy guy where I'm not expecting him to do significant things this year, but would I be surprised if like he breaks out and he kind of offers a plus to what Mike Gesicki did in the future, and we see that by year's end, like starting to break out. Nah, I wouldn't. Um, and I love what they have in Devon A Chain. I know there's a lot of like buzz about him in camp, but it's kind of just like people play everywhere, like in training camp,
Hmm.
because coaches are trying to decide like, can this guy play everywhere? One, and then so like what spots or what plays should we use him? It's not like
Hmm.
an indicator of like, oh, this guy is like completely versatile. He's going to be a three down back. He's going to be the focal point of our offense. No, it's not an indicator of that. It's more like coaches trying to see like, where can I actually use this guy? And if this guy goes down, who's our next guy up? That's kind of like what's happening in camp and like offensive installs at this point. So um, I would say wait for like when you're trying to see, oh, is Devon Achane the guy I should pick up in the very end of my drafts? I would say wait till the preseason, see how this unfolds. Is there a clear problem he's solving for this offense beyond what Mostert and Wilson can do? If so, go ahead and take it. But I think Mostert and Jeff Wilson did amazing in their roles last year. If you have either or on your team, that's fine. Like if you're one of those teams that don't get like a McCaffrey or Jonathan Taylor on this team, like these are perfect guys to get in the ninth or tenth round or later. But overall, like you're right, this offense is run through the wide receivers. That alone makes them very dangerous. And then Tua showed he can execute the system, which is one of the
Mhm.
most important things a quarterback can
Yeah. It almost feels like this team is built like a Madden team. Like when you do like a Madden franchise, or like the you obviously as the GM and coach or whatever, you like kind of have you find the groove of players you like, and it's like I feel like you look at Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, and Devin Achane. They're
do.
all
Fastest
really
guys.
similar types of players. I mean, obviously there's slight differences, but they're very similar types of players. And like I've seen Achane compared to just be like a smaller version of Mostert. And you look at the wide receivers where it's like you got Hill, you got Waddle, you got Wilson, you got Robbie Chosen Anderson, like even Braxton Berrios. Like these are like even Freddie Swain. These like guys that can be burners for your team, and that's it seems like that's what he wants. As he just wants burners as his wide receivers. His tight end, it's like is kind of not addressed as well, and so you're just like, okay, we don't run tight ends in this Madden team, and then you just kind of do you just get the best overall players on your offensive line and whatever. And so it just feels like a team that I would almost make in Madden in terms of like, man, I just want a fast team that just like cooks everybody, and then this is the team I come up with.
Hey,
uh,
and speed kills. Speed kills. So go double down. I agree with you, dude. It definitely looks like a Madden team. Um, and I think we didn't talk about this enough, but I think Mike White as the backup is significant for them because he can offer some like um, surplus starter quarterback play in
hmm
minutes. We saw that when he was on the Jets.
hmm
Skylar Thompson,
yeah.
probably one of the most underrated quarterbacks coming out of the draft. People were like, "Oh, what's the seventh round QB gonna do?" And all he did was like execute like just like Teddy Bridgewater did.
hmm
So I think they have a good quarterback room if the worst happens to Tua, where
hmm
Mike White I know can execute, and Skylar Thompson's only going to get better. So
hmm
obviously Tua was what makes the ceiling of the Dolphins so high, along with the combination of Hill and Waddle. Again, we don't know much about what the Hill situation, but even if he suspended half of these games, I significantly suspect that this team will be a major player in the playoffs.
hmm yeah.
All right, defense. So obviously, the big move to point out is they traded for Jalen Ramsey to go opposite of
hmm
Xavier Howard, and then they did trade for Bradley Chubb last year um, in the middle of the season. So they have two major additions that are going to be playing full time this season. But what do you see on this defense that gets you either excited or you want to see more of as the season progresses?
um yeah, I think this team has a lot of good key players where it's like the whole team isn't like stacked front to back like you see with the Eagles or like you see with the 49ers, but this defense has solid starters all across the board with the addition of elite talent in specific spots. And like when I think of that, I'm thinking like you have Jalen Ramsey. He hasn't played, I guess, to everyone's expectations over the last couple of seasons, but still he's still a premier quarterback in the NFL. I think any team in the NFL would be happy to have him on their roster. You have Xavier Howard, who I think is probably a better pick artist than cornerback, in my personal opinion. But he's regardless, that's still something you can't complain about from the cornerback position. He's still, I mean, is still above average in coverage. And Javon Holland, he's good. Jalen Phillips, I like. Emmanuel Ogba, he's a solid guy to have. And then Jerome Baker, I like too. But yeah, there's like a lot of really good talent. I like how their depth's looking as well. I'm a big fan of Cam Smith with this draft, and then I really like that they brought in Malik Reed. He was on the Broncos last season, and he was he filled in the role really well when he needed to, and I think that he has potential to get significant snaps this off season or not this off season, but this upcoming season with the Dolphins.
Yeah, Jerome Baker had 100 tackles on this team, and Christian
hmm
Wilkins also had 98 tackles. And then third highest in this team of last year, that's still there, is Javon Holland. And then followed up by Kato Kohu with 72. So this is a team that can tackle, and they will be willing to tackle, even if you look at the safety and the quarterback spot. And I think honestly, Kader Kohu is really underrated on this team. He's not even starting, and this looks like a nickel type defense to me, where they're not going to depend on um, Jalen Phillips is going to be their best pass rusher, but they're not going to depend on Ogbar or David Long as much when they run those nickel and dime formations because they have really good cornerback depth, but they don't have to rely on a 4-3-3-4 defense that's structured right now. But to your point, there's a lot of great pieces here. A lot of great pieces here. I think I would also agree. Like the secondary is probably the strongest here. Deshaun Elliott's shown some great things in previous stints. Javon Holland was obviously one of the more underrated safeties in the league, and Xavier Howard, while he is known for his interceptions a lot, I think he's still capable starting quarterback
Mhm.
outside of Jalen Ramsey, and um, you can scheme a lot of good things with Jalen Ramsey. He doesn't have to play the right cornerback spot because you got Kader Kohu and Cam Smith who can come in. And Nick Neiman did some good things too last year,
Mhm.
like when injury struck this team. So there's like would I want a stronger front four? Yes, but I think this is a team that's sneaky good without any big names that can get the job
Mhm. Yeah.
done. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next two teams where I think it would be very interesting to talk about them because
Mhm.
they're kind of not talked about amongst like the NFL players. Maybe the
Mhm.
Jets per se with the QB edition, but like when I'm talking about the major players in the AFC conference, I'm talking about the Chiefs, the Bills, obviously we discussed, um, the Bengals, the Jaguars. We think the Ravens are going to be that kind of team next year, but New England doesn't have that sort of quarterback play it was hoping for. When we're talking about what Mac Jones brings to the table and what they had to deal with on Matt Jones finished the season with a little under 3,000 yards with a 65.2 completion percentage, 6.8 average yards, and he averaged about 214 yards per game in this offense. And I remember in the middle of the season, they went to Bailey Zappi for 4 games, and he had a completion percentage of 70.7%, and his average yards was at 8.5, and he offered similar production. Yeah, he actually had a higher rating than Mac Jones in the starts he had. So there's a lot of talk. Is Mac Jones actually the guy, or is this time to go to Bailey Zappi? But when you look at this team and all the changes they made in the offseason now, what what do you want to see from this team in order to change our opinion on them in the division?
Yeah. Obviously, this is a really important year for Mac Jones. I mean, he was drafted in the first round, and have you have your own thoughts on like how like Bill Belichick treats his quarterback? You know, especially post Brady era. But I mean, it is a sound system. I think that a lot of players, despite the hard, I guess, coaching system, it is like a good team to be wanting to play for in the Patriots. And so I think, yeah, this is a huge prove it year with Mac Jones, especially just, I guess, looking at the overall talent surrounding him as well. Um, I think people are expecting him to, take a step up and better. And like, I think, in my own personal opinion, ideally, the kind of, I guess, player you get out of Mac Jones is, I'm not necessarily comparing like their play style by any means, but like just, I guess, like in terms of like quarterback tiers, it's kind of like that Derek Carr tier where he's not the greatest quarterback by any means, but he can put up solid numbers. He can win you games, and I think that's all you really need from Mac Jones in order to, have him stay with this team for however many years and, get them into the playoffs. And so, I feel like, yeah, you don't need him to play like out of his mind just because the rest of the team is so well coached that it's not one of those teams where you're needing your quarterback to do shootouts every single week like you may see with the Bills or you might see with the Bengals, Chiefs, and whatnot. And so, um, it's a really tricky balance, I think, with this team in terms of they can win games that are difficult, but it really is up to how the quarterback plays this season that'll determine their overall success. Well, you're muted, I think.
That is not good. Yeah. There we go. I'm on action right now. Sorry, guys. As we look at their schedule, I think that's a major reason you were talking about when we were talking about the quarterback play versus the weak teams in the league. Where if you look at their schedule, you got the Eagles, the Dolphins, the Jets, the Cowboys, the Bills, the Dolphins, and then you got the Chargers, the Chiefs, and the Broncos and the Bills. Like that's at least like 8 or 9 games where it's going to be decided can Mac Jones be better than that other quarterback?
Hmm.
And by the way we're projecting them, it's pretty much all losses, like for the most part. And
Hmm.
it's just a situation of like talent difference. Even like even like Tua and Mac Jones, he's gonna have to prove like he's better, like in the scheme he runs. I think he has a lot of things going for him with Bill O'Brien being an actual offensive coordinator and having experience in that area. But there's still like wide receiver questions where I'm just like, gosh, I wish he had Hunter Renfro on his team rather than like what they have in the roster. And they made a trade for somebody. Like I wish they made a move for T. Higgins or like Tyler Boyd or something like that. I think that would have been good. Like Tyler Lockett would have been a great trade candidate and helpful on this team. But that being said, I think they're still in the running for the division if they can split like the Dolphins and the Bills games because they're perfectly capable of doing so. They have the talent to do so. Even um, I have them splitting against the Jets, but I can easily see a situation where even though the Jets are more talented, the Patriots can win both games because they're that
Hmm.
kind of team.
Yeah, and I feel like this schedule that they have, obviously we're both not very high on them, but they're a very like I guess team with a lot of grit, I guess, if that's a way to put it. And so
Yeah,
um, I feel like this, as long as they don't let the game get away from them, they can be in a lot of these games like and keep it tight. Um, Obviously, there are the scary teams like the Eagles, like the Bills, and even the Chiefs. That could potentially just you know blow them out of the water. But I do think that a lot of these other games can be tight games as long as they stick to the fundamentals, which they have been so good at in the past. And so if they're able just to continue that going into this upcoming season, and Mac Jones kind of fixes some of his issues, or like I don't know exactly what went wrong with him last season. I mean, I know injuries was part of it, but I mean, you don't have that kind of season just because of injuries. I feel like other things kind of just going on behind the scenes that maybe we didn't know too much about, but um, I feel like this is a big part of if can Mac Jones, I guess, take the next step up and I guess play at that Derek Carr level of not being the one to cost his team games and being the one at least can manage the games or at least play above average in order to win his team games because like I feel like we talk about Derek Carr as like quarterback who hasn't had much success but and like he's kind of like middling but we've seen him have fourth quarter comebacks. We've seen him have crazy shootout games in the past. And so I think if Mac Jones can reach that type of production in his career, then this team can go from the 6-11 record I have for them to maybe just above 500 and maybe squeeze themselves into the playoffs. But um, again, it's the biggest question mark I think is this quarterback can he elevate this team and can he I guess minimize his errors to make his team good.
yeah, you have a good point there. And while I have them losing to the Raiders, I could see them winning that. While I have them losing to the Broncos, I could see them winning that because it's the way that the coach operates and the way that defense is structured. The defense is going to keep them in all these games. I have no doubt
Mm-hmm.
about that. But it's like you said, it's the quarterback play. It's going to be a major factor in what had happened and how he develops. Which is why I was hoping for them to make a move. Like if they get Hopkins,
Mm-hmm.
that changes the whole scope of the situation. because now with Hopkins, now I'm thinking they can win at least half the games I project to lose.
Hmm.
Because that's only going to help Mac Jones like throughout the other pieces. Like now, if we have like Hopkins, Juju Smith-Schuster, Tyquan Thornton, and a Kayshon Boutte, that's a pretty well-rounded group of four. But they just don't have that number one guy right now where I'm confident Mac Jones can develop. So with that note, I've given my wide receiver one assessment on this roster. But as we look at their offense, what stands out to you? Well, based on the depth charts.
Um, I do think they have a pretty solid offensive line just off the get go. I don't know if that's the greatest thing to be mentioning, I guess, about a team when I'm first talking about it, but in addition to this offensive line, though, I really do like the running back room that they have here. Ramondre Stevenson, obviously, he had a really good season last year. He was averaging 5 a carry, which is pretty elite level, and he's an elite pass catcher, which I think is pretty impressive. You know, him being like, I guess, a standard, I guess the stereotypical, three down type of back that can run between the tackles is like one thing in its own. But then the fact that he can catch out of the backfield and make plays off of that is another huge thing. And obviously, Pierre Strong and Kevin Harris didn't get much playing time last season, but in the moments that they did play, they did they did shine quite well. I don't think Kevin Harris will have as long of a career with the Patriots as the likes of Peter Strong would, but I do think that Harris is serviceable. But I am excited to see how Pierre Strong plays this season. I do think he'll have a bigger role in this offense, and obviously Ty Montgomery. It's kind of a weird career, but um, he has shown that he is a serviceable player as well. They got Kaseki, which I think can be decent for this team. Um, I think the Patriots do like having two tight end sets. I mean, I feel like we've just seen that with Belichick in the past of liking multiple tight ends, and so I think this can be a good combo here. And um, you have the receiver room is also pretty cool. Like obviously everyone has their own opinion on Juju Smith-Schuster. I don't know if he can be good, he cannot be good, but there's a lot of, I guess, guys on this team that can be good. Like I'm really excited to see how Tyquan Thornton plays this season. Obviously, Kayshon Boutte, he fell in the draft for like reasons that I'm not surprised about, but obviously, if he can go back to his initial years at LSU and play like that here, especially if he can get kind of that, I guess, harder dog mentality with Belichick, um, I do think that he can be a focal point in this receiving game. And like I feel like they have a lot of potential pieces that can be here to help develop Mac Jones further. But again, it's like up to Mac Jones to kind of fully use this team to its maximum extent in order to show that he is the guy for the Patriots.
Yeah, we sound like a deadbeat drum right now, just like constantly harping on this. But it is about the quarterback. It's a quarterback-driven league. We keep mentioning it. Ramondre Stevenson, I know there's some concerns where the Patriots are used to going by committee with running backs. And are they going to turn into this now with Pierre Strong, Kevin Harris, and Ramondre Stevenson? I don't think that's the case. I think when you have a back as talented as Ramondre Stevenson, you use the talent to the best of your ability. And I think Belichick's been a model of just saying, okay, who do we have on the roster? What are our options? Are just stuck with these options, and what's the best course of action? And in this case, for their running game, Stevenson's the best course of action on their team to be in the three down role. So I would not be surprised if it continues in that spot. I
Mhm.
wouldn't be worried about a committee situation like that in this offense, just because of the talent gap in that room.
Mhm.
And for my opinion, I think Juju's a strong wide receiver too. I think we've seen this when he was on the Steelers, and then when he was on the Chiefs, and in the stints before and after that. I think he he's really good when he has a really good receiver around him to help lead him up. I don't think he can create on his own. He can do it in spots, but just not inconsistently for him to
Mhm.
be the focal point. And Devontae Parker's kind of the same way in a different way. Like you just kind of feel like your big slot receiver. Devontae Parker's kind of like your go get it. just the me
Hmm.
ball mentality. It's the
Hmm.
50-50 option. And where Taekwon Thornton is just the biggest unknown. He's a burner. He's known as a burner, but he's kind of like who we talked about, like Jalen Hyatt coming out of the draft in Tennessee. Is he just a burner, or can he use route breaks and speed changes to really change that narrative? We don't know that. We have to see that. So if
Hmm.
Taekwon Thornton becomes that guy where he becomes the focal point, I'm starting to like this receiver room a lot more. Same thing with
Hmm.
Keishon Booty. If he comes out of the draft, guns blazing, just like he has the size, the speed to do everything. It's just the technique.
Hmm.
If you can master the technique as a rookie, which is extremely difficult, he could easily be the wide receiver one on this team. I like this core four, but I'm if they add Hopkins, my opinion changes on this.
Hmm.
That's kind of like the level of talent they need to infuse this with. And I don't know if it's going to happen because I mean I've heard they're on good terms now, Bill O'Brien and DeAndre Hopkins, but you just don't know. The way it ended in Houston, you just don't know. But if he was on this team, I feel a lot better. I feel like their their offenses can compete with the likes of anybody because of how talented their defense is.
Hmm. Yeah. And then kind of going back to Ramondre Stevenson, I do think that he's arguably like the best running back the Patriots have had over like the last maybe like 10, 15 years. Like Garrett Blunt is maybe the next argument you can have, but like when LeGarrette Blunt was on this Patriots team, they kind of strayed away from the committee look and used Blunt as a focal point in this offense as, a three down back. And I feel like Stevenson just provides more as a runner, as a running back in this offense. And so I wouldn't be surprised, like you were saying that Stevenson kind of just has another season of just being that guy for this team. With obviously you can rotate guys like Pierre Strong, you can rotate guys like Kevin Harris into this offense, but it'll definitely be Ramondre's you know job to lose really in this upcoming season. I think
Yeah, one word about the running backs. Mondre, done.
he's good. I love him.
He had 1,000 yards on this team with a dysfunctional offense. So
Yeah, and I
think
think
about that
he
as his
wasn't.
floor. He
Yeah,
can do anything.
yeah. Let's see.
I
Yeah,
think he had like 1,029 yards
yeah.
on the
It was a
team.
1,040 yards on the season,
Oh,
and then oh, and then he had 421 receiving yards as well on top of that.
well, there you go. But he was their offense last year, pretty much. So if you think about that as his floor, a lot to like if you're thinking about should I
Hmm.
draft this dude or should I not.
Yeah, yeah, and he was like a big surprise this last season. Just like kind of, I mean, he showed flashes, the year before, but he really came into own this last season, and I think he surprised a lot of people at how good he actually can be as a full time starter. But their defense is kind of cool too. So I guess we can go into that too. But
Yeah, I mean, they just added Christian Gonzalez in the draft. I really like what they got. Josh Uche. They this Patriots team always has a knack for finding like defensive ends and linebackers that are not going to make the Pro Bowl and just be like that big name J.J. Watt guy, but they give J.J. Watt production collectively. It's the weirdest
mhm,
thing. It's like a Mike Zimmer defense with like
mhm,
more versatile pieces. And like you got Lawrence Guy, Devon Gotcho, like Dietrich Wise. They're not guys who are like, okay, let's sign them to $50 million contracts for 3 years or something like
mhm,
that. Like you don't think of that. Matthew Judon would be the closest thing because we knew how productive he is from the Ravens. But this is don't get me wrong. This is a capable front seven that if Bill Belichick does anything, he will scheme them to like get three running sacks. So I'm not even going to question what Belichick can do on that end of it. It's just we have to see what happens with Jonathan Jones. But Kyle Duggar's underrated. Jabril Peppers has been around different places. Probably wasn't used in the best way. I like their safety depth.
mhm.
Um, or was it Jack Jones who's under suspicion? So I'm not sure. But regardless, the starting front four secondary they have, um, this is functional. Like I think their defense is going to be the leaning point on how this team wins games.
Yeah, one guy I'm actually really high on in this defense is, oh man, I'm gonna butcher his name, but it's
Barber?
like, no, it's Ola Kunle Fatukasi. um, so I
Tell me
know that
about it.
like, yeah, so I believe he didn't get a combine invite, but the Patriots drafted him like day two, I think, and like he's if like you go back and look at his tape where it's like he played really good football. I think it was a surprise pick for a lot of people, but I think that this has potential to be a really solid pick, and especially with the fact that like he isn't in a position where he needs to start immediately. You know, you got Juwan Bentley ahead of him, you got Jelani Tavai, you got Mac Wilson, who I like all three of those guys in the first place as off ball linebackers, and then you add him as a guy that you can develop, and I think that he can be one of the like in the next maybe like 2 years from now, this guy could be, you know, the leader of this defense and, being that like commander type guy that just kind of is able to lead this defense to success. And um, yeah, I just really like this linebacker depth overall. Obviously, Raekwon McMillan, he's on the IR, I guess, but he's had starting experience in the past. I don't think he's elite by any means, but um, I mean, you have a lot of solid depth on this team that can be good. Obviously, I love Matthew Judon. He showed last season that he can be an elite guy just on his own. He was like literally in talks for like defensive player of the year, I think, at one point or another last season, just with the sack totals. And I think, regardless, like I mean, sacks aren't everything, but at the same time, sacks are everything in the regards that like you don't have to worry about getting pressure with your other guys when Matthew Judon can essentially generate pressure for you every single play that he's on the field, which is a pretty nice thing. And obviously they have like depth in other spots, but it's just always nice to know that you have a guy that you're pretty confident can get at least 10 sacks in a year, and he got well over that last season. So I think that I think they're looking good here. And then obviously you mentioned their cornerbacks and secondary, which I'm a big fan of too as well.
Yeah, and Christian Barmore is probably a guy I'd be excited about because I can see him easily starting on this defense if he needs to. He did a lot of great things um, in the snaps he had, even though he just had 23 total tackles on the year and played 10 games. Um, that's he is a guy I would keep my eyes on because he can be one of those interior forces that can help Matthew Judon get more sacks. And I think Jawan Bentley is a little bit underrated on this defense because he had the most tackles by at least 40. I think the next
Mhm.
closest was like Kyle Duggar with 78, but this dude had 125 tackles. So he is like your Dante Hightower on your defense for now, but I wouldn't be surprised if Fatakasi, based on what you've seen, can be the leader at that defense.
Mhm.
I think this team is missing like a clear Dante Hightower like type leader where year in year out you'll have that. So hopefully it's Bentley, but I
Mhm.
think they have a future guy in Fatakasi. That's pretty exciting to hear about. And plus, the one guy I want to highlight on special teams is Marcus Jones. He's not talked about as premier punt returners in the games, but he had a couple games last year where he made the difference in whether they won or lost. Like I remember the 10-3 game when they beat the Jets. It was off of Marcus Jones' punt return. So that's something to know. With Bill Belichick, like defense and special teams are always going to be a higher priority than on other rosters. So that's all I have got for the special teams aspect. Don't know much about Ryland. Don't know much
Mhm.
about Behringer. But um, yeah, this is this is like going to be a defense that's like top 10, not talked about as the elite defenses in the NFL, but they'll give the top teams fits.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and overall, I just think that even like with maybe not elite players at all these positions, this is just an extremely well coached team, and I think that's what elevates this team to be competitive in their games, despite maybe not having the same amount of elite players that we like to see on a couple of the other defenses that we already looked at today, and then the past couple weeks that we've gone over to these other divisions.
Yeah. I would not be surprised if they're like flirting with 500 or above 500,
Hmm.
or even having a playoff spot next year. This is one of those teams where it's just like we talked about, fully quarterback dependent, and then also can they get like offensive production from somebody where the defense is like, we gotta stop that guy
Hmm.
because if it's just Ramondre Stevenson, then it's gonna be tough on Mac Jones trying to beat people through the air.
Hmm.
But the one team we are really excited about and has like the highest variance in this division easily has to be the Jets. And that's only because they added Aaron Rodgers on this team that well, we are saying this. And with that, it elevates the whole stock of all the young talent they've accumulated with Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson. On the other end, you got Sauce Gardner, Quinn Williams. Just a lot to like on what both sides of the ball have to do. And there's potential where they're being talked about as one of the Super Bowl contenders already because they have Aaron Rodgers.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that this is a really interesting team. I feel like obviously bringing in a new quarterback adds a lot of variance that it's hard to account for. Granted, it is Aaron Rodgers, but um, it'll be interesting to see because this team is definitely talked about as one of those teams that was quote unquote a quarterback away from being contenders, and I guess this season we'll really see if they were that one quarterback away from truly being a contender. Because again, like I mean, we looked at. Granted, coaching was awful last season for the Broncos, and obviously I know so much about the Broncos. I'm a huge Broncos fan, but we see everyone talked about how the Broncos were really one quarterback, one elite quarterback away from taking the next step to being playoff contenders. I mean, we're still talking about them as if they could be playoff contenders this upcoming season as well, but we obviously saw that, with a lot of change, um, it's not always a guarantee that everything falls into place as you may have expected it to. And so, again, they can be that Super Bowl contender, but there is a lot of, I guess, unknowns of like what are the real holes of the team just because quarterback play was so bad last season that it may have masked some of the other maybe potential issues that this team did have just because it's so easy it was super easy to hyperfixate on the quarterback position.
Yeah, and that's a good point you brought up because they had a lot of changes on the wide receiver front that I really paid attention to because I was a big fan of Denzel Mims coming out of the draft. I was also a big fan of Elijah Moore coming out of the draft. And I just found it odd how they were like stuck on the depth chart and not being utilized enough to the degree they were because I thought a trio of Denzel Mims, Elijah Moore, and Garrett Wilson could be one of the scariest trios in the NFL, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
But they were not used that way, so we never got to see it. And I just look at their depth chart now with wide receivers, and I'm like, okay, what's the plan here? Because I know Wilson's the guy you got to target, but
Hmm.
so does the defense. Like, if the offense knows that Wilson's your focal point, what are you going to do? And schematically, they have Hackett, who you're familiar with from last year, how effective he was as a head coach. How does he do in this offensive scheme? Yes, I know he has familiarity with Aaron Rodgers, but it's one of those things where Aaron Rodgers can only do so much from the schematic end. And if you're facing teams like the Buffalo Bills or the Miami Dolphins within your own division, it's going to take more than Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers
Hmm.
to beat those teams. So with that, um, based on that, you would think all of our negative talk has this team being worse than the Patriots, but I actually have them as high as 12 wins, and Korshan has them as high as 9 wins. So we think the potential of this like upper echelon young talent is enough to get double digit wins, or if not
Hmm.
above 500.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, like they have a lot of, I guess, good pieces on both the offense and defense, and so I do think that they definitely suffer from a difficult start of the season, as you can see from a tremendous amount of losses, and I do think that part of, I guess, their success towards the end of the season as well just comes from a lighter schedule plus I think that, as they get closer to the end, they kind of start to gel better as a unit and start to find their rhythm and pacing a little bit better that, they can beat teams like the Browns that, I think could be a really strong team towards the end of the season as well.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, the very end of their schedule is going to be what determines how they do this season. I think weeks 8 through 17, they can easily have a winning record, and I only have them chalking up 3 losses. Where, well, you have one more, you have 4 losses. So we both think they're going to have a strong stretches towards the end of the year, um, where we could see them chalking up 6 to 7 wins pretty easily
Hmm.
on that front. But like you said as well, like the beginning 6 weeks of the schedule we have two different takes on it. I'm pretty optimistic, saying, okay, the talent level on this team is enough to beat the Cowboys, Chiefs, and the Broncos. Where you're like, I don't think they're beating the Patriots. I don't see them beating the Bills, Chiefs, or Eagles. And they're reasonable takes. Those teams have been together a lot longer. They've gelled, and they have every reason to believe the Jets. Even though the Patriots are lesser talented at quarterback, lesser talented at the receiver positions than of whatnot. I just think the Jets defense was so underlooked last year because of the quarterback play that they were on the field so much. But
Hmm.
with Salah leading the way, that defense is well gelled enough where they can keep these games close. And then Aaron
Hmm.
Rodgers has been in this league for so long now, where he can win those close ones by the inches
Hmm.
in regular season games. Again, these are not like playoff games where the stakes are high, it's win or go home. These are kind of
Hmm.
just regular season games where anybody can win any given Sunday. And I think with these teams trying to figure out the Jets, that the Jets are going to be one of those teams that are going to quote unquote surprise people because people don't know what exactly to expect from an
Hmm.
Aaron Rodgers led team with different talent.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say like this is their floor to ceiling kind of for this team. I think we got it
Hmm.
pretty accurate. I could also see the worst case scenario happen where this team has all this talent, but even with the addition of Aaron Rodgers, they're struggling to make it out of the division
Hmm.
because there's a lot of quality teams here.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, just the AFC in general, just so loaded that it's hard to feel like I can fit enough teams, to make the playoffs on the AFC side of the NFL. And I feel like the Jets are more than likely to be one of those teams that are kind of closer to that borderline of maybe like trying to squeeze their way into the playoffs rather than being one of those surefire. Oh, this is the playoff caliber team from the get go.
Yeah, and if this team makes the playoffs, I think they're fully capable of like making a deep playoff run. I don't know about Super Bowl
Hmm.
just yet, but I think they can make a deep playoff run. It's just one of those situations, like I said. There's so many top 10 QBs in this conference that can win a game by themselves
Hmm.
easily. That you have to get them not only on your schedule, but you're competing records against, like even if they're not on your schedule throughout the year. There's going to be so many 9-8, 10-7, 11-6 level teams where it's just like, oh gosh, like how do we see the Jets fitting here? So I could easily see that scenario coming as well, just because of the loaded class.
Hmm.
So the biggest question mark I see on this team, other than like a secondary wide receiver, is Brees Hall getting healthy. Like ACL
Hmm.
injuries are always tough. We talked about it with Javante Williams, but I'm not as optimistic on Hall like returning to form as like
Hmm.
what he was like pre-injury. But I really love their depth on the running back position, where I don't
Hmm.
think it will hurt the offense significantly. I'm a huge fan of Israel Banakanda. Zonovan Knight was a revelation last year. Michael Carter is one of the pass catching backs that are not talked about enough that can run inside and outside.
Hmm.
I think he's a great starter. He's a great starter for any team looking for a running back,
Hmm.
but on this team, he's just a plus. And
Hmm.
while I think there's a lot to be desired about the wide receivers, Denzel Mims is still on the roster and probably still not going to start. But
Yeah.
there's a lot, um, there's a lot of question marks outside of Garrett Wilson on this team.
Hmm. Yeah, this is a really middling wide receiver room. I personally think Corey Davis is probably the second best receiver on this team. Um, at least from like a play style that I'm looking for and like looking at previous production, I feel like I've seen better stints from Corey Davis than I have from, the likes of Alan Lazard. I think Lazard's higher on the depth chart just because Aaron Rodgers, specifically asked to get Lazard on this team. But I think again, I look back, I guess like what the Broncos had, um, in terms of like everyone's saying the Broncos, their receiver room was like sneaky good last season, and I still think that they can be good, but I feel like everybody was almost hyped on the fact that the Broncos had an elite receiving room, and they were just waiting for the quarterback to, fix all the issues, and then we kind of saw the holes and the weaknesses of that receiving room, and I think people see Aaron Rodgers here and that they're going to elevate this, and he's going to elevate this receiving room, but I mean, you look at Nicole Hardman, and you're like, yes, oh wow, he has Aaron Rodgers to play with, but like literally, he was playing with Patrick Mahomes, who was arguably the potential, like future goat, is everyone's, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he is, but and it's like he didn't really have that great a production with the Chiefs with Mahomes, and obviously it's different schemes and whatnot, but still, it's like if he can't have success with that MVP, can he have success with a different MVP? Is kind of the concern here. Yeah, Alan Lazard, I'm not super high on. Corey Davis, he's had like a middling career. Don't I think he's an okay as like a third receiver option on this team. Maybe Randall Cobb. I think he's only here because he's friends with Aaron Rodgers. Uh, Mims is a big question mark. I think initially he did have a lot of potential, but then he kind of fizzled out. Whether it be internal drama, his just development track that he's been taking, and a lot of other things. But I don't think he has too much of a future, at least with this team. He could go somewhere else and kind of a resurgence, similar to like Zay Jones, maybe with how he started with the Bills and then he went to the Raiders for a little bit, and then now he's one of the guys on the Jaguars who put up a pretty solid season. And maybe Mims is that type of guy. Um, and then I mean the tight ends aren't too bad. I like Conklin. He played good in the times that he got the ball last season. I know it was a bit tricky with just a lot of quarterback changes. Kind of stinks when Joe Flacco at whatever old age he was the best quarterback on your team for a while. But I do like CJ Uzoma as well. Jeremy Ruckert's not too bad as a third option or third tight end. The offensive line has a lot of question marks for me though. Um, and like it's a lot of these question marks and like I guess which is what leads me to not have them as strong of a record. I mean, 9-8 is still a good record to have, but like, I mean, Dwayne Brown, he's, he's around 40 years old. Like, sure, he's had good production in the past, but like, how much longer can he play? Like Andrew Whitworth, he like he's he would have retired by now, And Mekhi Becton, obviously, he had a down year last season. I think he put it on to like the fact that he was playing right tackle last season. I think he does want to play left tackle. So we'll see how that works. Elijah Vera Tucker, I'm kind of a fan of. The center has a bit of question marks, and then the left guard also is a bit of a question mark in terms of how good will they be. And so, luckily, you have Aaron Rodgers, who's known to get the ball out quick. But again, I feel like there's just a lot of question marks on this offense that can be really, really good, but could also be like super, super bad for this team and end up being its downfall.
The more and more you describe all the question marks on this team, the more I feel like an idiot that I have them up at 12 wins. It is absolutely hilarious. But I find myself like agreeing with a lot what you said. Like just a quick note on the tight ends because
Hmm.
I don't have much to mention about them other than the fact that Ruckert and Zach Moons are promising options, and Conklin ended up having 500 something yards on this
Hmm.
team, which is like good for the second leading receiver on this team. Which that maybe he's the wide receiver two on this team to consider.
Hmm.
But you have a point by saying Corey Davis should be the wide receiver two on this team based on ability wise, because there's no like question he can't block. He can run routes. He's not tasked with being the number one. Excuse me. He's not tasked with being the wide receiver one on this team anymore with Garrett Wilson. So he can win as a wide receiver number two. After all, he was drafted fifth overall by the Titans. Clearly, there
Mhm.
was something to like about his ability to separate and win
Mhm.
in contested situations. And I think he can still do it as a wide receiver too. And then you got the question with Denzel Mims. It's so odd because Denzel Mims requested a trade because they're not using him enough, and he had a point when he had a couple games, but the coaches actually gave him a chance. All he did was ball out. I don't think it's a question of ability. I just think it's a question of usage. So, like you
Mhm.
said, I think a second career somewhere else, like on a different team, will unlock his talents. Um, a la like what Devontae Parker did for the Patriots a little bit before he went back to what he was. But it's there's a lot of like the biggest thing I see is the receivers because I'm just like if your questions about the offensive line are correct, you need the wide receivers to win
Mhm.
quickly, beat press with technique, and learn how to do it. Right now, there's only Garrett Wilson.
Mhm.
So who is that guy? Does Randall Cobb still have it? I know they invested in Jason Brownlee, but I have no idea what's going to happen on that front if he's going to develop quickly. That's too high expectations to put on him. I see
Mhm.
this as going to be like a run first offense where it's
Mhm.
going to rely on the Brees Hall, obviously, Michael Carter, Israel Abanikanda, so Zonovan Knight, like those guys by committee. And then it's just the play action game where the play action is going to free up guys like Al Mazard and Nicole Hart.
Mhm.
That's why I see this going because if it's like third and 10, third and 9 with this team, like nobody scares me on this roster besides Garrett Wilson.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, it's just a lot of question marks, and obviously these question marks can become positives, and I mean that's probably what you were looking at in terms of their upside, and obviously
yeah,
there's the whole Aaron Rodgers hype, which is like I don't blame anyone for hyping up this team to be really good. I just think that there are quite a lot of things that do concern me on this offense. Like in all honesty, the tight end position might be the most safe position on this offense just looking at it. Where it's like Brees Hall, obviously he's probably the second best player on this offense, but obviously he's coming back from injury. We don't know how he's going to play. Garrett Wilson is likely to be the best player, obviously, and then it's like Aaron Rodgers. He can be the best, but again, it is a new system. Can he elevate these guys? Can he overcome the offensive line? And um, yeah, and so it's kind of like scary almost to think that a tight end room of Conklin, Uzoma, and Ruckert might be like the most, I guess, consistent group of the bunch here, and like not suck as bad. But um,
well, I don't think their running backs are bad. I think all of
well,
their running
yeah,
backs are capable of 1,000 yards, where they might be able to help that offensive line and become
hmm
a better run blocking unit than a passing unit. Because while Dwayne Brown might not be the best guy you want to be on the
hmm
line, like protecting and passing situations like
hmm
that, just because of his age, like I think the running game can help alleviate that, where it allows him to establish his power
hmm
um, and his ground for like play action, where it's a lot easier to sell the run block and go into the pass block. But
hmm
I hear you. The tight end might be the most like consistent group on this team.
hmm
Um,
yeah,
it's
and I
more
mean
of
I
like
do like that
running
running
back has
back
the
room
highest
too.
upside. Tight end, I know like these are going to be solid producers
Yeah, like I know what I'm getting out of this tight end room, and I feel comfortable with like what this tight end room is versus running back. Yeah, I do like the depth. Like I talked about Israel Binaconda all the time, just about how I think he is great. I was really bummed that I went to the Jets just because I thought he had a really high ceiling, and the fact that he's kind of buried in this depth chart right now stinks. But obviously, not having Hall at his full potential is a huge blow to this offense, especially if they are looking to be a run first type of team. And so, if you struggle to have that, and especially if the receivers just can't get it done, and all of a sudden teams are keying in on the run, then it all of a sudden it's like, well, yeah, Michael Carter's good, Abinakon is good, Zonovan Knight, they are good players, but can they overcome teams just stacking the box all the time? Because we did see that kind of happen last season in terms of their offense is really stagnant at time. Granted, I know Zach Wilson sucked, but like if they can't get their pass game going, I feel like it's their team really does shut down pretty quick.
Yeah, and that's fair. And like for all the talent Aaron Rodgers has, like like you said, if they shut down the run and they only have to key in on one guy like Wilson, who else
Hmm.
is gonna win? It's just a matter of question because I'm not confident in Lazard doing it right now or McCole Hardman.
Hmm.
So this is just like a wait and see team in like training camp. But
Hmm.
I think the biggest reason why I have them a 12-win team is this group of 11 players right here.
Hmm.
If the Buffalo Bills are the best defense in the NFL, like this defense is probably up there, like top
Hmm.
five, top three. If I could be so bold, because everywhere I look on their front 11, there's probably guys that have high upside, like Quinton Williams, Sauce Gardner, Carter Lawson, C.J. Mosley, and then solid guys that aren't going to beat themselves, like G.J. Reed, Jordan Whitehead, Adrian Amos, um, Quinton Jefferson, John Franklin Myers. They have a lot of those guys, and when I look at
Hmm.
how solid leads this defense, he leads them in waves. Like Al Woods was a revelation for the Seahawks last year. Then Will McDonald, Solomon Thomas, Jermaine Johnson. That's a really good backup run of defensive linemen if guys go down. I like what they have in the defensive line. And I think the way they structured this defense is really similar to San Francisco.
Hmm.
Um, it's just a question of is Jamian Sherwood kind of mumbling the first and last names there. And Quincy Williams, the guys to get it done. Or
Hmm.
where's the situation where they had to rely on Ashton Davis and Bryce Hall, both players who I'm really high on to excel in the nickel situations or like three safety situations.
Hmm. Yeah, I think this defense they definitely do have a handful of really solid players. Like Quentin Williams, in my opinion, is the best player on this defense. He was arguably the best defensive tackle in the NFL last season. Um, and I think that the fact that most people probably don't even think that is a huge sign of it's like how underrated this team can be on defense. Just looking from like a stat standpoint, I believe Quentin Williams he had 12 tackles for a loss and 12. He's like double digits in both sacks and tackles for a loss. He's an elite
Wow.
pass rusher. He's an elite run stopper, and like he probably has more pressures and he probably has more block sheds that don't even go into account of those stats that have helped benefit the rest of his defense. On top of that, you have C.J. Mosley, who's he is a veteran middle linebacker who can command a defense really well. Quincy Williams, he played really good football last season. He had over 100 tackles, I believe. Um,
Well, there you
you
go.
know, and so like they got good guys. I'm not the biggest fan of Sauce Gardner. I think that if he wasn't Sauce Gardner, he'd have a lot more penalties called on him. That's just my own personal opinion. Like I understand there's a lot of hand grabbing and a little bit of pulling and tugging on receivers and quarterbacks every play in the NFL, but I do feel like you look at some of his highlight tape and it's like he's literally just pulling the guy down before he gets the ball, and I'm like, it's kind of iffy on some of these calls, but I still believe that he is one of the premier cornerbacks in the league, despite maybe getting a few penalties to go his way. But the rest of this, you know, secondary, I think is full of talent, and like I said, I think Quentin Williams elevates the rest of that defensive line as well. In that, like, while you may not have the most elite talent with the rest of your defensive line, it doesn't really matter as much just because Quentin Williams can elevate them in the way Aaron Donald elevates the rest of his defensive line.
That's a great comparison. I think he's the closest thing to Aaron Donald that there is in the league. I'm not saying he is Aaron Donald. I just think he has that level of talent, like and as a pass rusher, that shouldn't go unnoticed. And like he's basically the quarterback of that defense, even though
Mm-hmm.
Mosley's a great solid middle
Mm-hmm.
linebacker. Because interior pressure is a quarterback's greatest weakness. And the faster
Mm-hmm.
you can generate that interior pressure, the faster you can get sacks or generate sacks. So the quarterback's trying to break contain, and all of a sudden he's right in the pass rusher's
Mm-hmm.
lap. And he's just one of those guys that can single-handedly wreck a game, and he's one of the reasons why they had a winning record and should have been in the playoffs with great quarterback play. Like this is a defense that sorely needed rest and consistent offensive production to truly show what they're capable of. They could be the top defense in the NFL. There's nothing stopping the team from doing that. I think there's better talented players elsewhere on other rosters, but the way this team feeds off of Quinn and Williams is something special.
Hmm. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think that while this team may not be the best team this year, obviously, with how I had my record, but I do think there are a lot of really underrated pieces on this team, both on offense and defense, that are pretty easy to build around, and the likes of you have Quentin Williams and Sauce Gardner, which I think is a phenomenal staple to have as, young defensive pieces to build around. And then on the offensive side of the ball, you have, I mean, if Mekhi Becton gets back to form, you have him as a solid offensive line piece. And then, oh man, they have another. Who's their other offensive lineman? Just a second. Elijah Vera Tucker. I'm a big fan of him. It's like two focal points on the offensive line, and then you have Brees Hall, who, after I'd say maybe a year from now when he's fully recovered, he's gonna be another great focal point to have around your team.
He's gonna tear
Garrett
the league
Wilson.
apart. Yeah, like look at how
Yeah.
many electric runs he had when he had the opportunity to. I just think there's a big danger in expecting that from him because like he's like Hall is like very dependent on lateral cuts and electric
Hmm.
moves. And when you're coming off an ACL tear, that's not the smartest thing to do.
Yeah.
So like we're wishing him the best, but just expect some lapses in that where maybe other guys have to step up in bigger roles while he recovers and gets his full speed back.
Hmm.
But fair point.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be optimistic about with this.
Yeah. And so it's kind of tricky because it's like you're expecting a lot from Aaron Rodgers being the quarterback with this team, and you have a really short window to win, with Aaron Rodgers, obviously. And so um, they're in this like, I feel like they're just in this really dangerous limbo of like, if they just sucked for one more year, they could have been in this running for, Caleb Williams or Drake May. And like, I'm just thinking, like, imagine like, in theory, having that quarterback for just like for however long, with your core being Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall, having Mekhi Becton as your offense, and then the key focal points on defense. But again, these players are already good players, and so I understand the reasoning to go into move now, the reason to go into win now mode, just because, yeah, Quentin Williams, he's young, but he has double digits tackles for loss, double digit sacks. You have, Mekhi Becton, just one of the he's huge, like he's like like
He
he's
mauls
what a great
anybody.
guy to
He's a
have.
mauler.
Yeah, you have Garrett Wilson, who's phenomenal as rookie year. He was, like offensive rookie of the year caliber type player. He's in the next couple of seasons. I wouldn't be surprised if he's talked amongst the likes of Justin Jefferson, of Jamar Chase. Just have those two guys like Von Ra, St. Brown. You have Chris Olave, and then you have Garrett Wilson, probably Marvin Harrison coming in next year. But that's kind of like a core of like the best young receivers in the league. I guess CeeDee Lamb and AJ Brown's in there too. But again, it's that like elite tier of receivers that it's not every team has, and so there's a lot to look forward to with this Jets team, and but I'll just kind of leave it at that. And obviously, once preseason comes, we'll have a little bit more to talk about these teams. But yeah.
Yeah, no. You have a lot of great points with the passion. Like I can clearly hear it. Like it almost feels like they're the Portland Trailblazers of the NFL, right? They have this
Yeah.
one superstar, Aaron Rodgers, that just comes on that team. And they have a lot of young talent, but it's just
Hmm.
like they have so many other holes on the team that they have to
Hmm.
fill out. So you just hope Aaron Rodgers stays for like two more
Hmm.
seasons where they'll get a chance to fill out those gaps and stuff.
Hmm.
Or maybe they sign DeAndre Hopkins. That's a
Yeah,
huge
you
variable
never.
with this.
Yeah,
Again,
I wonder
if
where
they
he's
sign
gonna go.
DeAndre Hopkins, I feel good about my 12-win prediction. But
Yeah, I feel like that's
after
a
our
little bit more
Jets segment,
likely.
I don't feel like they're a 12-win team anymore. Of course, talked me
Hmm.
out of it. But as always, I hope you guys enjoyed our segments. We're having more and more fun as we're doing this, but we'd love to hear your feedback on how we can make it more fun for you guys as listeners. If you guys are already doing so, please follow us on Instagram at amad.mission. Um, please give us a like, subscribe, comment on anything you want to see in the future episodes. And with that, see you guys later.
Peace.